Hello, investors. This is Todd Thomas, Associate Portfolio Manager with Revere Asset Management. Today is Saturday, August 16th. The time is 10 o'clock a.m. Coming to you from Boca Raton, Florida to bring you the Revere Roundup weekend walkthrough. State of the market, we shifted this week to the four coveted green arrows. Last week we had that yellow neutral area at the short-term 21 EMA. However, we had a strong rally and rotation into small and mid-cap stocks this week, reclaimed the 21 EMA on both of those indexes and upgraded that to the fourth coveted green arrow. Rest of the market stays strong. What happened last week? Well, overall, the indexes are at all-time highs once again. However, we did see rotation in the small caps and small caps led up 3.07% on the week. Also saw home builders, biotechs, and some of the other interest rate sensitive areas extremely strong last week. The Big Eight, which is the Mag 7 plus Netflix, up 1.12%. Revere Growth 8 Composite, up 1.7%. S&P up 0.94. Equal weight showing relative strength up 1.52%, indicating the broadening base underneath the surface. Q's up about 0.5%. Equal weight's up 0.64%. Dow up 1.74%, primarily because of United Healthcare's pop on Buffett as well as other hedge fund managers taking positions. Midcaps up 1.55%, and the Russell 2000 standing out with a 3.07% gain despite weakness on Thursday and Friday. 60/40 up 0.61%. GROTECTION up 0.78%. TurboTection up 1.09%. What happened last week? Well, Tuesday sparked the rally and the rotation with a very tame CPI coming in line, and that sent really short-term interest rates as well as the probability of three cuts increasing on by the end of the year. However, Thursday the PPI came out with a huge expectation breaker, up 0.9 versus consensus of 0. This put the annualized rate at 3.3% versus expectations of a 2.5% increase. Core also came out at 0.9, which kicked that annualized increase up to 3.7 versus 3 expected. However, the September rate probabilities are still over 90%, but the 3 rate cuts are primarily off the table now. Also, Amazon revamped their grocery offering with the intentions of offering same-day delivery of fresh produce beyond their Whole Foods and Amazon Fresh offering. This is challenging Instacart, DoorDash, and Walmart, which sold off on the news. Small cap hit 6-month highs, including home builders, financials, and biotechs all rallying this past week. Solar stocks rallied big on Friday as the U.S. Treasury Department and the IRS released new guidance, which is favorable on the tax credits and less punitive. Also, the Data Center Coalition formally petitioned the government to maintain the subsidy framework, primarily focusing on the need for power from all angles. Earnings per share winners, these are all the earnings winners on the week. Earnings losers, these are the losers on the week. Also wanted to just highlight a couple things brought out by BTGC's market strategist. Earlier this week, he noted that the SPY opened 21 of the last 22 days higher, so gapped up 21 of the last 22 days, which is a record dating back to 1993. Also, small caps broke out, and he noted that the last 2 times that small caps broke out, which were July and November of 24, was the last gasp before the broad S&P pullback. So what we need to do is monitor whether the same happens here or whether this rotation takes hold and continues to lead the bull market. Also, he noted a play in the XLV, which is healthcare, versus the technology. Also noted that the XBI broke above the 200-day moving average, which we're going to show. And also a huge winning streak of NVIDIA staying above the 20-day moving average for 72 straight days and counting now past this, which is an all-time record. And finally, another nuance, the NDX which is the NASDAQ 100 for the first time since its inception, is at a record high with less than half of its members above the 50-day moving average. Normally, that number is more like 76%. So it just shows you of the narrowness of the rally in the NDX. These are the big gainers on the week, noting a lot of biotechs, WGS, and these particular biotechs really leading the list. And just the losers for the week. Earnings for the week ahead, Palo Alto coming out on Monday night, as well as Fabrinet, which is a contract manufacturer, Home Depot before the bell on Tuesday, as well as Toll Brothers, and several retailers coming out later in the week, such as Target, TJ Maxx, and Walmart coming out later in the week. Also notable Futu on Wednesday morning. That's Chinese stock. That's looking pretty good here. Zoom, Ross Stores, and Intuit, and BJ's. Economic front, housing starts on the 19th. Building permits. The big news of the week, however, is the FOMC minutes, as well as Powell's meeting at Jackson Hole, where all eyes will be on his decision on the direction of interest rates. So that's the big thing. The Philly Fed Index on the 21st, S&P Manufacturing PMI, and for both manufacturing and services and leading indicators. So we've got continuation of some key economic numbers. All right, heading to the indexes for the week, as well as the inter-asset correlation. Once again, SPY's another new all-time high on the week, up 0.94%. Equal weights standing out, up 1.52%, however, still below this all-time high from back in this late November, December area of 188.16. But taking a shot at that hopefully soon. Q's up 0.49%, lagging. The equal weights up 0.64, Dow up 1.74, primarily on UNH. Mid caps up 1.55%. So nice recovery here after the PPI. Sent it back in on Thursday. Closed right at the 80 MA. CPI, this is a big day that recovered the 21. Then on Wednesday, we followed through, but then pulled back on Thursday and Friday. Russell also same thing, broke out of this 2283 level, out of this kind of V-shaped cup with the handle and a shakeout, but did close down, traded down on Thursday, but stayed inside on Wednesday to close and stay above this 2283 level. VIX down slightly on the week, still right around that 15 area. Dollar down slightly on the week. Gold still consolidating, down 1.8% on the week. Gold miners also flat on the week. Silver down 1% on the week. Bitcoin a failed breakout this week, up about 0.5%, but failed this breakout from Wednesday. Pulled back, closed right on the 21 EMA. So potentially a short-term top here on this failed breakout unless we quickly recover and take another shot at that. Bond market was flat on the week. The 20-year bond market was down 1%. Yields on the 30-year were up 7 basis points, and the 10-year yields were up 4 basis points on the week. Mag 7 up 0.9% on the week, and that is it. Going through just a couple of the Mag 7 here, Apple was up another 1% on the week after breaking above the 200-day moving average. Amazon on their grocery offering up 3.7%. Still off the all-time highs from the spring. However, this news sent it higher. And not much to say about the rest of the Mag 7 here on the week, as most of those were flat to down. Google up 0.5%. Netflix actually added to the watch list this week. Looking a little better here as it reclaimed the 50-day moving average, building this currently start of a flat base, which is 15% or less. So that's one that we'll keep our eyes on in the week ahead. One of the things I wanted to do today is go through the industry ETFs because it was a rotation week. So I wanted to show maybe the top 5 or 6 ETFs on the week, starting with the solar up 8.4%. Also, several solar names added to the watch list this week. And this was a huge volume, up 8.7% on Friday on the government news from the IRS and the Treasury Department. Jets also up 8.3% on the week. I believe there was some news also that one of the discount airlines, maybe Spirit, officially failed its bankruptcy. Not sure what happened there, but also airline rates are up 4% in the latest economic survey. So this looks pretty decent here. Biotechs are really the ones that stood out this week. And individual names up 6% on this index. Also broke above the 200-day moving average this week. Although we are still looking for the moving average alignment, this is the first week it's back above the 40-week moving average, which is really our initial place to start watching things recovering from the lows. Home construction now 2 weeks above the 40-week moving average, looking better, but still waiting for that moving average alignment. Pharmaceuticals looking a little better, and IBB. Now let's get into the watch list for the week. I sorted this by the biggest gainers for the week since it was a rotation week. And really, solars were the big ones that stood out right off the top. We've got Sunrun here up 17% on the week. Had earnings the week before, gapped up, but then followed through this week. Also, Solar Edge with a 20% gain this week, mostly on Friday. This has been trying to bottom here, building this giant stage 1 base. Again, this is a stock that's just gotten totally creamed. So even though it was up 20% on the week, it hardly looks like it was up at all relative to where it came from. Next tracker, another one up 7.7%. Now getting into the other names, HSAI with earnings this week. This is a China LiDAR player, which gained 13%, one of our big earnings gainers on the week. Spotify up 3.8% as it reclaimed the 50-day moving average, building this cup base, currently about 22% deep. Nebus follow through after last week's earnings. This is one of the biotechs standing out. We've had it on the list for several weeks now. This is a Swiss company which makes a non-chemotherapy treatment for blood cancers. Originally a Chinese company, and broke out here through this pivot zone and looks extremely strong with relative strength, making new highs. Rocket Lab's just building a flag. Hinge Health with earnings this past week. Some nice, actually the week before, pulled back to its 8 EMA interweek and rallied back. Again, Toddzilla took a position on this the week before last on the earnings gap. Came a little bit below my cost. Once it bounced off this 8 EMA and showed strength, I also added to this position this week. IREN up 6.7%. This is another IPO that we've been watching and that I like. After a shakeout below the 21, reclaimed and moving back up the right side. This is primarily on TeraWulf's huge gain last week, up 78%. This particular name is a Bitcoin miner turned data center player, and Meta signed about a $7 billion deal with them on Thursday, and that sent these shares tearing. Again, this is only a $3.4 billion market cap, but this is a 10-year deal valued at $7 billion with basically provisions to increase this deal. So this looks pretty good. This is an upstate near Niagara Falls clean energy data center play. So that's out of line here. So let's get back to the list. Roku. Noted Stanley Druckenmiller took a position in this and his new filings. And that's primarily what sent this stock back up through the 21 and the 50-day on the week. Robinhood, institutional leader here. GROTECTION holding, TurboTection holding, Toddzilla holding, following through week before last, but flat on the week. Tempus AI, I believe they had earnings. This is one that looks pretty interesting. Again, if you'll recall, this is an AI healthcare play, still losing money. Reported earnings the week before last and followed through this week pretty nicely. So back above all its moving average and definitely back on the watch list. WGS is another biotech we've had on the list after a huge earnings gap. Back here, up and then consolidating and then finally popping back through these old highs from earlier this year. Halozyme's another biotech which is building the right side of this long base. Doximity is another healthcare play, basically for the medical doctors, and this is one that had a nice week the week before last. FN has earnings next week. That's contract manufacturer. A firm showing strength after it bounced here off its 21 EMA on a little bit of a shakeout. I got kind of shaken out of this. I bought this on the shakeout +3 up here. Had a pretty good cost. Went up about 13-14%. And as it faded hard this day, I just didn't like how hard this one faded back. So I didn't want to round trip it, but it really came back to my entry here and bounced nicely. So really could have probably held that, but I just didn't like how hard it sold off. And this has a history of doing that. So another one, AS, Amer Sports, with earnings coming out next week. This has been building this long flat base after the last quarter's earnings gap. Was not able to make any progress in this base after this gap. So again, sometimes these things are really only earnings gappers and they don't give you much in between. And that's kind of what this one's done here with an 11% base. SoFi, another one that looks very good in the fintech area, had a nice week up 7.5%. This is one that I'm really interested in tracking. United Airlines up 13%. This is an insulin company, infusion system, up 4.6%, building the right side of this base after really 2 earnings gaps now. American Semiconductor consolidating. Alnylam Pharmaceutical, another just huge move here out of this space, and another 2% this week. Oracle, a Toddzilla holding, just basically trading a 3-week tight. I did take half of this off the table on this break of the 21 EMA on Wednesday. They had an announcement where they're cutting headcount in their cloud business, primarily because they're exceeding expenses in the data center build-out side. But it did end up coming back through the 21 EMA. But I haven't liked how this has been lagging here lately, so I'm in half my initial position. Reddit just continuing, again, Toddzilla, GROTECTION holding up basically 11 straight days now. Can't ask for much more than this, just a massive earnings gap and run situation, about as good as it gets. And this week went through these all-time highs as I thought it would with that huge earnings report. Newmont looking good with a 2-week tight. AppLovin backed off after its earnings gap through this cup base, down 3.7%. A lot of these names just in the growth area faded this week. Rhythm Pharmaceutical in the biomed area up 6%. Again, I told you there were going to be several biotech names added this week. Celsius, another 10% follow through after this earnings gap. Again, pretty good action coming back through and in a solid stage 2 uptrend now. Light reversal on earnings this week. This is a Toddzilla holding. I trimmed a little bit going into the earnings report on Wednesday, sold more of my position into the gap up and still hold a core position in this. It did maintain the ADMA, so definitely reversed, potentially a short-term top. May want to build a base now, but good enough to hold my core position in it. DR Horton in the home builder space up 5.8%. This looks really nice this week. Waiting for moving average alignment still, but these home builders are definitely looking better, and these shorter term weekly moving averages are crossing back up through. And we got a golden cross on the daily too. Pan American Silver flat. Insight. This is one that I picked up from the earnings gaps this week or from last week and followed through out of this big consolidation. This is a biomed company as well, building this nice base. Primoris, that was a huge gap. Netflix, again, building this flat base. Talked about that in the Mag 7. Back above the 50, so that puts it back on the watch list. ANET flat after a big week. Some of the gold stocks looking good. Bloom, another 23% this week. Totally missed this one, but this earnings gap was, this was a tough one because it gapped on this Oracle news, and that was only days before their earnings report. So I don't like to buy things going into earnings, but again, they had a good earnings report and just followed through nicely. So, oh well. Urban Outfitters coming out with earnings this week, or I'm sorry, the week after next, trading like 5-week tight. IBP advanced another 3% after a big earnings gap. Pulte, another home builder. Berkshire took positions in a couple of these names this past week too. So again, here you go with all these moving average coming up through the 40-week. 40-week still needs to flatten and start moving higher. Golden cross occurring. All these are definitely showing early entries. CCJ just trading tightly along the 10-week moving average. Definitely want to keep your eyes on this name. Another opportunity to buy some on that 50-day and 10-week. Quadruple U. I like how this one's shaping up. Only thing I don't like is it's a lower price stock, but it's another rare earth and uranium play. Choppy, a little bit choppy, and again, small positions with these names until they start showing some tighter action, but I like the way that looks. Lattice advanced another 3%. Generac breaking out of this big earnings gap situation. Huge cut base, looking pretty good. FTAI is a name that had a good earnings gap, and I like how it just is really traded tightly on this ADMA. I don't know if this has much juice in it, but it's got some nice earnings growth ahead. Definitely canceling type numbers, so nothing wrong with that. MedSpace, after this massive 47% earnings gap, came in, undercut the ADMA, and it's following back through. Numbers aren't particularly huge here, especially on the earnings, but they like something about this stock. And this had a big gap back here, built this big 46% cup, and another big gap. So that's why I keep putting that on the list. Mercury, this one's a little bit shy in volume for a lot of our screens, but it had a big earnings gap this week, so I wanted to put that on the list. Zillow, this is another real estate play up 5% on the week. Futu with earnings next week, so this is one of the leading stocks in China that we have on the list. Symbotic, although their earnings report was a little sloppy, they missed and guided weak. Stock has been maintaining the 21 EMA, so keeping that on the list. IDEX, another biotech with a big earnings gap, clearing this big base back here. Corning, another name we've been watching. Credo, Toddzilla holding. Just riding a core position here. My stop would be a break of this 21 EMA, and all it did is pull back. I've had some offensive trims in this, but overall I'm holding the core position in this as well. GE Verona, this is another GROTECTION, Toddzilla, TurboTection position. Undercut the 21 EMA this week, but held it. This has a characteristic of moving off of this 21. Could be on the chopping block if it doesn't make any progress off this 21. But again, we own this from back in the follow-through day. So our cost is pretty low here. I may even give the 50-day room for some of my position, but I'll sell more if it can't hold this 21 EMA. Modine Manufacturing is a stock I'm watching. Celestica, just a bellwether we're watching. DWXT in the nuclear area. Seagate. Kratos, not much to say. VSAT, just monitoring that gap. Oust, big move on earnings the week before last, or actually this week. No, actually, that was one, two, yeah, the week before last on earnings, but a huge follow through this week. So up 34%. Rocket companies, Don took a position in this the week before last, up 10% this week. Cooper, that's another mortgage servicing stock, up 7.8%. Opgo just consolidating. CGNX, or robotics play I'm watching. AMD, pretty tight here, looking good. Shop broke back through the 21-day on the earnings gap, close to getting cut here. I don't like to see that type of action. Lemonade had some nice action on earnings this week, up 17%. Broke through these old highs too, so that got added to the list this week. Nice break here and resumption out of this shakeout below on earnings last quarter. Build this big base here, so it looks pretty good. MP just flat this week. TEL 4-week tight. Palantir backed off 5% this week, extremely extended. Rambus flat this week. Guidant Health, this is another healthcare medical service stock that broke out this week. A-Lab continued another 3.6% on this monster run. NPR, it's another stock I'm watching. Oklo pulled back this week. Micron building this cut base after an earnings pre-announcement here. Definitely interested in watching this one, as these numbers are pretty strong. 40, 30, 48, 35% triple digit earnings, 90% earnings. Definitely a stock that I'll certainly take a position in. And if it builds a nice handle, provides a nice early cheat opportunity potentially. Galaxy backed off. I tried this week. Probably shouldn't have. These are some nasty reversals, but I tried some on Wednesday and got stopped out for about a 7% loss on a small position in this. Thought it was going to go. And it didn't. And that is it for the watch list. Well, if you have any questions or would like to become a client, my email is todd@revereasset.com. My Twitter handle is @ToddMichael70. If you'd like to become a client, please give us a call at 855-REAL-WEALTH or 855-732-5932. And also, we appreciate likes, shares, and subscriptions to our both X handles and YouTube. So have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll talk to you next weekend.